Good day, my listeners. Man, you're in for a special podcast today. If you could have been in the green room, you would have loved it, but you couldn't. But now you're in the real room. So I want to enter, everybody knows that have listened to our nonprofit podcast. They know Glenda Hicks, but I want Glenda today to make it a little bit different than we normally make it. We usually cover the three um, insights, strategies, tips that you can level up your ability to have a more impactful nonprofit. So, Glenda, tell our viewers who you are, what you do, and who you serve, and then I'm going to give you the platform to really share with our viewers something special today.
Thank you so much, Pete. It's always a pleasure and a delight to be here with you and sharing information and nuggets that hopefully can be impactful and powerful and helpful to our listeners in their nonprofit organizations. I am a certified governance consultant, and I work with nonprofit organizations to help them strengthen their infrastructure, build their capacity, and contribute toward their ability to sustain themselves for the long haul as they serve their mission. So I tend to focus on board governance, leadership development, and operational efficiencies. And I've been at this for a few decades and have learned a lot of things along the way. And it's my pleasure and my responsibility to share what I know. And so this is how I affect and impact my community by strengthening nonprofit organizations that are doing good and helping others.
I love it. Today's a very special day, and I would love for you to share your insight, what it means to you, what it means to nonprofits. So our viewers may see a little bit different format than they've seen on our weekly podcast.
Absolutely. Well, we're celebrating Juneteenth today, June 19th. And so it was really important that we talked about that and put it on our show and align the parallels with what the significance of that is to nonprofit work and how it shows up. And so Juneteenth, of course, is celebrated because when slavery was ended and emancipated, and slaves were emancipated in 1863, there were some that were not, and those were slaves that were in Texas. And they did not get word. The Union soldiers did not arrive until 1865. So it was 2 years later, and June 19th, 1865, that the slaves in Texas heard that they were free. And so we are able to celebrate that in this country as a holiday because it is American history. And although there's a lot of negative stories around that time in history, all of it needs to be known, understood, and celebrated because it contributed to the development of this country. And it really connects to the conversation of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And that is a major concern and issue in this country and around the world in many different ways, but certainly here. And it comes into the conversation with nonprofit organizations, as it should with all organizations, around board governance and leadership and development and opportunity and employee engagement and health and their opportunity. So it's appropriate that we continue the conversation today about those areas that I work in particular, as well as its connection to diversity, equity, and inclusion and opportunity. And so I'm excited to draw that parallel today as we have our conversation about serving organizations and building their capacity.
I love that. And just as a co-host with you, I want to hear your perspective, and I know our viewers want to do the same thing. So give us an idea what it means to you and how this day is so special.
Sure, absolutely. And so, in the work that I do, I'm asked to help clients in a lot of different ways. Some of the things we develop together because they recognize the experience and training and education and knowledge that I have in this space. And they'll reach out to me to facilitate a conversation or help them navigate a process or a strategy. And so in the process of doing that, other things will be created or developed or evolve uh, by me in concert with them to address their needs. And so if I think of specific area, for example, just in board recruitment, where board members want to bring on new members to the board, and you want to focus on what your needs are. And so often the question is, well, I need a skill. I need a skill. I need a finance person. I need an attorney. I need a fundraising person. And that's a great acknowledgement and a necessity. But what we like to recommend is that boards take an inventory of the skills they have, and those skills are in different dimensions of identity, which ties into this whole DEI conversation. And so you're looking to see how representative you are of different mindsets and different experiences, as well as different skills, different communities. There's a huge movement nationally around making sure that your board represents the communities they serve.
Mm-hmm.
And for many years, nonprofit organizations have done great work serving communities, but in other ways, they've fallen short. And some of that has been attributed to the fact that their board doesn't represent the clients and customers that they serve. And the significance of that is that you don't have the same life experiences. And so, although you can develop amazing services and programs that have an impact, there's still a piece and a component missing if you're not involving those that you're serving in the conversation, if they're not at the table, if they're not bringing their real lived experiences to the conversation when you're talking about how do we develop a program that's going to truly be effective for everyone and not just people that we move in circles with, or that we know, or that look like us, or think like us, or speak like us. You want to ensure that those considerations are on the front end when the program is being developed and ideated and thought about, and not on the back end when you've already rolled it out and you realize, oh, we've missed the whole population. Oh, this doesn't work the same with this group or in this community. And now you're retooling, and because you didn't have them at the table on the front end. And so as you recruit board members, you're able to take a look around the board table and see who's there. But in doing that, you're asking them to share about themselves. So it's okay to have these conversations. They're encouraged. It's okay to ask these questions to find out the dimensions of a person's identity. What makes us unique? Because we're all human, so we're alike in that regard, but we have unique experiences and we have unique living situations and backgrounds and traditions and cultures. And all of that contributes to a robust, inclusive environment where you can hear how where you grew up impacted what you have today, what you realize today. And so those experiences around the table are just priceless and they're necessary. And so sometimes you'll encounter clients where, and I have, where they'll say, I don't want to track that. I don't want to have a checklist. I don't want to ask people about these different demographic layers. What's your sexual orientation, and what language do you speak, and all these other things, that what's your religion, because they feel like that's unfair, that you're basing things on those parameters and we're all the same. Well, yes, we are all the same because we're human, but we don't have the same lived experience. And if you don't acknowledge that and embrace that and give people an opportunity to share that story and then find commonality within your story, which then breaks down barriers, which allows you to communicate better and appreciate people and value people, then you are not fulfilling your responsibility, and you're not being inclusive, and it's not fair, and you're not going to have a robust board team because you're going to allow these internal dynamics of your mindset, really, your mental model, your mental mindset of how you
Mhm.
think of things to control every decision you make. And you haven't opened up your thought process to other perspectives. So it's really critical to understand that and bring that to the board table as you're recruiting. So you start with a board composition matrix, which
Mhm.
allows you to survey your board and let them answer for themselves about all of their identities and their skills. And then that allows you to understand it, embrace it, and leverage it to deliver better programs, better services, more effective services, and to penetrate those communities that will then see that you care about them, you see them, you hear them, you acknowledge them, they're part of the plan, and then they're more inclined to give you contributions. So it goes full circle and it's very holistic, and it allows you to then tap into other populations and communities of givers that have capacity to give. They have a heart for your mission, and now they know that you care about them and
Mhm.
that they're included and that they have a seat at the table. So, just from a board recruitment standpoint, it comes into play.
Yeah, that is, I mean, I hope our viewers kind of absorb that because I think we hear two things. Don't discuss religion and don't discuss politics. And so, but I had a gentleman on, he was a pastor of a fairly large church. And so we were talking on the podcast, and I say, we have our CNN camp and we have our Fox camp, and nobody's in the middle. You're either in one camp or the other. I said, what do you make of something like that? And he goes, well, if I could share with our viewers, it's grace. I may not agree with you, but I
Hmm.
got to give you grace to really hear because everybody comes from a different background. I mean,
Right.
so our diversity becomes a really superpower because you
Hmm.
have a diverse mindset.
Hmm.
But the minute that we say, I can't listen to this person because they watch Fox, I can't
Hmm.
listen to this program because they watch CNN, and so we form this closed mindset. What do you think? Like, I love that, we're trying to get to know the person.
Yes.
And you're right. You're a black woman. I'm a white guy.
Yes.
So we have different backgrounds. I mean,
Hmm.
we're both human. We both have
Yes.
common interests, but we both have very different interests. I
Yes.
mean, very different backgrounds. I can't tell you what it's like to grow up as a black woman because I mean, all I know is what I read. It's kind of like only you can do that. And so, I mean, I love the idea that you're talking about really sometimes topics that are, what do they say, taboo or
Yes.
whatever it is,
Hmm.
you
Hmm.
know, because if you're effectively going to have an impact on your community and your nonprofit, you got to get beyond that.
Yes.
You
Yes.
can't just say, I can't ask my board members this question. Why?
Hmm.
So just can you share with our viewers more than what you're just sharing? But
Yes, absolutely. You do have to have the conversation and you have to listen. I'm a part of an initiative right now with the United Way of Greater Atlanta on child well-being for all, and we're going through some things on a weekly basis around this very issue and how you help the child and make them whole. And it starts with understanding their circumstances, their identity, having conversations. But someone in the session this past week made a statement that was so profound, which is you learn by listening.
Mhm.
No one ever learned by talking, but they learned from listening. You want to hear and connect. So I want to hear your story. I want to hear your thoughts. I want to hear your mindset. And then let's dialogue around that and let's connect. Let's break down barriers. Let's dispel beliefs that we've grown up with that were placed in us in a lot of ways. Um, that were negative or because people had it placed in them. You know, you
Mhm.
talk about breaking cycles, you talk about breaking generational dynamics, and
Mhm.
things have just perpetuated over time, which may have not been good or healthy. And so that's what we're trying to do, is break down the barriers and connect as people. We're human. I was watching a TEDx, can't remember the person that did it, but she was talking about, as humans, we have this need to connect, to be in community with others.
Yes.
And it's difficult to do that when you won't sit down with people and listen and hear and share and try to break down the systems and the structures that have allowed us to keep those barriers up and that have created inequities that were based on race, which is a human construct. I mean, we developed that concept of race and looking at people and judging them by what we immediately see. You
Yep.
know, you see that I'm a Black woman. I see that you're a white man. Okay, fine. Now, what does that mean from a lived experience? So you have to see it. You can't say I'm blind, because that's offensive in and of itself. You
Mhm.
see the person, but now get to know and hear and talk to the person. Worked with a client that, in the space of what they served as their mission, they brought up the concept of ACEs, adverse childhood experiences. And this is that whole concept of things that happen to you as a child directly impact your development and your opportunity and
Mhm.
situations you have as an adult. And that influences our behavior, our mindset, our health. And until you talk about that and address that and acknowledge it and accept it, then you don't understand the differences that people have experienced that have contributed to their behaviors and their situations. And so listening to those stories and understanding what that means, and then connecting with that person on the human level, and
Mhm.
then translating that into your services, into your business model, into your training programs at your organization, into your leadership pipeline of how people in your organization can advance to higher levels, from an employee standpoint. You know, the thing that really revealed itself as a consequence of COVID was the dissatisfaction that many employees have with their place of employment. And we saw the mass resignations and exodus of folks from their jobs, because they recognized that what they had put up with for years, they did it because they felt they had to from an income standpoint. But COVID, when it forced people to work from home remotely, they began to realize what was more important to them and what they valued and what they were able to accomplish at home versus having to drive through traffic to get to work and deal with that stress. I just was connected with a nonprofit out of, I believe, Michigan, that is around road rage. The nonprofit focuses on dealing with road rage, you
Wow.
know, and I thought, wow, I would have never thought about that.
Yeah.
So that's the whole creativity and the difference of exposure. He said in his post that it was born out of his own experience with road rage. Now, I don't know if he was on the receiving end or the giving end. That
I
didn't
know.
create it. But, you know, there's all this power in
Mhm.
taking what we've experienced and wanting to translate that into a nonprofit, which is why
Mhm.
nonprofits are so plentiful. People want to start organizations that serve needs that they see that have not been addressed. And so when you begin to dialogue and you begin to get to know a person for who they are as a human, and then listen to their lived experiences and incorporate that at every level of your organization, then you'll have a more sustainable organization that makes a more impact, a grander, if you will, impact on their community. And it creates better working teams.
Yep.
And it helps them to understand how to appreciate what each other is bringing to the conversation, because that is something I've helped organizations with, is their inability to communicate and
Mhm.
their lack of trust, for one another, both from the board to the staff
Mhm.
and from board member to board member, where they're not conversing. They're going outside the boardroom and sharing information in the public space that should not be shared, or that's based on a personal agenda that's not for the greater good of the nonprofit, and it's not in the best interest of the nonprofit, but it's purely coming from a place of self-service, which is
Mhm.
not what the nonprofit is all about. It's a community entity. Once you get that tax exemption recognition, that nonprofit now belongs to the community, and you're accountable to the community. And it's not about your personal agenda when you come to serve that organization. It's about a collective of servant leaders coming together,
Yeah.
working to do what's best for the organization as it serves the people that its mission is directed toward.
Yeah, I love that. There was a lady in our facility, well, she was first at the community center here right around the corner. And three separate ladies came up to me and said, "You have to have Crystal Duke on your podcast." And I'm going like, dang, three people. And she told me her story. And I went, yeah, that's cool. How she transformed her mom and helped her go from kind of a sedentary lifestyle into a person that just vibrant. I met her a couple
Mm,
months ago. But anyway, over the course of the years, she's on our Mindset podcast. I've gotten to know her. She's like my best friend.
mm,
I mean, so she's a Black lady.
mhm,
She's younger and
mhm.
she's like into health and fitness. I'm kind of into it, but
Okay.
the common thread was mindset.
Mhm.
We started talking and geeking out on mindset. She actually bought me a book right over the corner somewhere, Mindset by Carol DeWitt. And it was like, I had heard of it, but I never read
Mhm,
it. And
mhm.
then all of a sudden on the podcast, I'm bringing up stuff I read. And so we found a common bond of
Yes.
things, but we're obviously very different in our upbringing and even age and just all that thing. But it's kind of like you said, the commonality can bring people together.
Yeah.
And I had plenty of guy friends. I had every guy friend out there, but I never, even though I have sisters, daughters, and granddaughters, I didn't have girls that were friends,
Mhm.
because you
Mhm.
just kind of stayed your separate, when you're married, you got to be careful of all that, so
Sure.
I use the Billy Graham thing, like person in the room, all that kind of stuff. But you can't, now that you have the ability to get to know people from a real authentic base,
Yes.
it's incredible
Yes.
the level of that relationship if you just kind of throw all the other stuff out the window and really get to know people. S-
Absolutely, absolutely. And it expands your sphere of influence. It
Yes.
expands your relationships and who you know. And then when people are looking for things, you become a connector because you know people far beyond your comfort zone or your circle that you traditionally move in, which again circles back to the DEI framework of we
Mm.
need to hire some folks and we need to bring in some folks. And we're constantly bringing in the same folks that look like us and always think like us, and
Yes.
we don't know anyone who's different that we
Yeah.
can bring in. And then you have the false argument that they're not qualified or I can't find them, and that's because you don't know them, because you don't move, you're not
Yes.
willing to expand your circle and go out and talk to and get to know people who don't look like you or who don't think like you, but think in great ways with great ideas and great skills and great capacity and ability. And so that
Mhm.
opens your pipeline for finding employees for your organization or finding board members, because you're just getting to know people and you're talking and you're listening and you're connecting dots in your head saying, oh, I ran into someone that was looking for XYZ for their organization or their leadership program or to volunteer. And just like you said, I just met this person and I know all these things about them now. And
Mhm.
so it just serves in so many different ways for your personal growth, your personal development, and then from a business standpoint. And at the end of the day, nonprofits are businesses.
Yes.
So if you step outside those traditional circles that you keep yourself in and you go into other dimensions, other realms of socialization, of social encounters, and of business and settings, then you realize, wow, there's so many great people out there. that I had not had the honor of meeting and
Yes.
interacting with and getting to know. It just is, and it's mind blowing. And then it goes back to, systems and how a lot of systems that were developed and policies were because people weren't exercising that behavior. And as a
Hmm.
consequence, people were getting left out of opportunity. And
Hmm.
so a lot of times you have to bring in legislation to ensure that there's a level playing field and there's equity and there's equality and there's access and there's benefit. And so that promotes growth, development, and opportunity. And then you get backlash from others who feel like now they're left out.
Hmm.
And everyone, if we're all in it together and we all have equal access, then it's left to us as individuals to show how we individually shine and what's unique about us. And so that's the whole competition thing. When you go for a job interview, there's hundreds of people and they whittle it down, 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 down to the one they pick. But at least
Hmm.
if you're in the 100, you have the same opportunity. And
Yes.
so there's this whole, there's an alignment, and it takes many different things to make it all work and happen for everyone. So it kind of circles back to where we started with why we're celebrating today to in the first place.
Yeah, I mean, before I want you to share with our viewers in just a second, but it came to my as I'm listening to this podcast, I did a limited belief system because I'm thinking Glenda Hicks nonprofit. That's it.
Mm,
I
mhm,
mean,
mhm,
and then we're talking about mindset. You're talking about servant leader. Well, I have
mhm,
a podcast on servant leader and mindset. So
mhm.
just today, I'm going like, I can't just think of Glenda Hicks as nonprofit. That'd be
Ah,
crazy. That's where my brain was limiting, like, because I'm thinking, stay focused on, but no. So we would love to have you on the mindset one because you mentioned mindset a couple
mhm,
of times, which
mhm,
I think is such a strong thing to keep that mind open. That's what Crystal taught me, the
mhm,
open mindset versus the closed mindset.
mhm,
And so that in the servant leader, because if you're going to be strong in the nonprofit, you better be have that servant leader that also has that open mind to be able to whatever you can learn to grow your nonprofit. You always have to get better because
mhm.
there's thousands of nonprofit. Before I wanted to ask you one question because it's fresh on my mind.
Sure.
I'm listening to this lady present Northside Hospital.
Mhm,
And she says, we're a nonprofit. And I'm
mhm.
going, what? And so I asked her, I said, help me understand. I didn't know you are a nonprofit. You're obviously for profit, but you're nonprofit. So she gave a good explanation. So I just want you to share with our viewers, like, I mean, Northside's a pretty big, they have 29,000 employees. And I don't know, the other numbers are big.
Mhm.
So they classify themselves as a nonprofit. So share with our viewers what does that mean?
Sure, absolutely. So first, let me clarify. Are you speaking of Northside Hospital here in
Yes.
Atlanta? Okay,
Mhm.
yes. So it's certainly an entirely accurate and possible for their hospital to be not for profit. Many of them are. There are some for profit medical institutions that are
Mhm.
owned by investors, stockholders that are looking to make a return for personal gain. But
Mhm.
there's also many hospitals that are not for profit institutions. And what that means is that really it comes down to your intention, your motivation. So they're all incorporated as a business, as an entity, likely a corporation, a C
Mhm.
corporation. But after incorporating, they're incorporating as either a for profit or a not for profit within their state under whichever jurisdiction has the auspices.
Mhm.
Many times it's Secretary of State, but anyway, they incorporate first at that level. Then they will determine that, okay, as a not for profit, we want to obtain that tax exempt status. So then they'll apply to the IRS to be recognized as some form of 501C
Mm-hmm.
institution. Most of the C's I deal with are C3s, which are your traditional charitable social service education type organizations, healthcare. But the motivation is what is the distinction. You're not starting that corporation for the purpose of being individually remunerated, getting cash back for a return on investment. You're
Mm-hmm.
starting that corporation for the purpose of serving the community in some way through medical, charitable, scientific, something of that nature, where it's around the benefit to a group of folks, a stakeholder group, that is not about the benefit to those who organized the entity. So that's why a lot of times their front facing image is not necessarily clear, that they're really a not for profit, because their structure looks so business-like. It looks so
Okay.
corporate. And
Yeah.
that's where I remind individuals and organizations that you are a business. A lot of what the for profit and the not for profit do on a day to day basis are parallel. They're
Mm-hmm.
both trying to reach customers or clients. They're
Mm-hmm.
getting paid. They're sending out invoicing. They're working with vendors who provide them services. They're processing accounts payable to pay those vendors. They have employees. They have to withhold taxes on those employees. They have to pay Social Security and Medicare taxes for those employees. They're doing training for the employees. They're hiring. They're advertising for employees. They're advertising perhaps for board members. They're advertising to the community about their services.
Mm-hmm.
So almost everything aligns between the two. And that's how oftentimes you don't realize they're a not for profit. And
Yeah.
there's educational institutions of higher learning. There's lots of universities that are for profit, and we mostly recognize the ones that are not for profit or that they're state
Mm-hmm.
institutions. And so you have to look on their website to see how they classify themselves. We are
Mm-hmm.
a not for profit hospital or institution, higher learning institution, before you'd even know that they were not for profit. So it's very easy to not know which classification they have unless they tell you in their marketing or on their website.
Yeah, that's really good. I mean, we were in a crowd, so her answer was short, which would
Mm-hmm.
be that. But you dug deeper into it, so I have like a better kind of framework for it.
Mm-hmm.
And now I kind of look for that because I just had a kind of a mindset that the word nonprofit meant nonprofit, but
Mm-hmm.
no, I see what you're saying.
Oh
They'll be
yeah, they definitely need a profit as well in the not-for-profit
yeah,
space.
they'll
You
be
hear
a
about.
out of business nonprofit if
Yes,
you
I've
don't.
been asked that many times. Can we
Yeah,
make a profit as a not-for-profit? And I said, absolutely. That's how you are able
yeah,
to do things that your funding sources say that
yes.
you can't do with their money. You're able to, pay for a fundraiser, because if you have a government contract, it will in all likelihood say that our funds cannot be used to raise other funds. You can't pay a fundraiser. So you'll
Yeah,
need other sources of revenue to do that. So absolutely.
I love it. I had Nicole DeWard on it, and she runs Rise. She runs it's a nonprofit coffee shop for special needs. And
Mm.
it was like it was hilarious when she spoke to our Rotary Club. She was like talking to her husband, and her husband said, "So they were trying to get a profit," but she said, "Yeah, I guess I've learned how to run a nonprofit for the last couple of years because I haven't figured out how to get a profit." But she
Yes.
wants the profit be able to pour back into the business. But she was joking with her husband that she's a good manager of nonprofits. And yeah, so
Yes,
yeah,
yes.
well, tell our viewers as we wind down. I want you to personally like, what does this day mean to you? Like, how does it touch your heart, and what can you share with our viewers that you would share?
Well, it's significant and important because, our all of our ancestries date back to the founding of this country and all of the dynamics that happened in the enslavement period, and we were all on some side of that. And so that is my direct lineage of having family that worked, plantations. And so to be able to have had people that were advocating for a holiday like this to be um, created in this country to continue to share history with
Mhm.
everyone here and give people an opportunity to know the history is significant for all of us. And it's not a question of rewriting history, which many of us have heard put out there, but it's including history that was omitted,
Mhm.
and that just because you're not aware of it doesn't mean it didn't happen.
Right.
And so that's, part of expanding the full complement of history and the opportunities that we have in this country to be able to do things like this. Um, so it's meaningful for all of us,
Mhm.
not just people of African descent, but everyone in this country shares in each other's stories and
Yeah.
histories. And it's beautiful that other races, if I must use that word, and cultures and ethnicities have that same opportunity in this country to celebrate various other holidays that we have, or entire months that we have that represent identities,
Yes.
dimensions of identity, when we recognize women and we LGBTQ communities, and all of these are dimensions of our holistic identity.
Mhm.
And you do a lot of work in the space of different abilities. We used to call them disabilities, but we've matured ourselves to now acknowledge it's differently abled. And not that I'm at a disadvantage per se, but I just am abled in a different way, and
Mhm.
how we've enabled ourselves to still partake of various things that people thought you couldn't because of your disability. So
Mhm.
all of that is connected and powerful and can have threads that lead back to a particular um, day or event that you celebrate. But what I would leave folks with is two things that I was introduced to. One is a video, a YouTube video called Inclusion Starts with I, a very
Mhm.
powerful video
Hmm.
about identity. And the other is a model about how to make systemic change, the dimensions of systemic change that was put forth by a group, FSG, and then in concert with Harvard, some folks from Harvard. And it's a very good model that the foundation of it is your mental model, which we talked about so much today in
Mhm.
terms of belief systems and how we get to systemic change. So those are the two things I would leave with folks today as I think a great takeaway from our conversation this
I love
morning.
it. I love it. I have nothing but to say thank you. Appreciate you sharing with us
Likewise.
today. A little bit off of our normal 3 insights that we want to teach our nonprofits, but I've learned a lot. And plus, I see Glenda on different podcasts. So if we're reaching out and saying, "Hey, would you please be a guest on the Mindset?" You'll know it came from this podcast. So tell our viewers, how can they get a hold of you?
Absolutely. So my website is 501cimpact.com,
Mhm.
www.501cimpact.com. And they can click on the contact us and shoot me a quick blurb of what you might be interested in talking about or have a need in. And that's the simplest way, and the easiest thing to remember is to just come to us through the website. I would love to talk to you.
Awesome. I want to encourage our viewers to share this. Plus, I want this is a little self-interest. Facebook changed their rules the other day. I mean,
Mm.
last. So you have to have 100 followers on Facebook for us to stream it live. So we have 50. So
Okay.
I would appreciate our viewers sharing this with their friends and then like our page so we can bring Glenda to Facebook again because now we're just on YouTube, Spotify, and Twitter or X, whatever. So Share this, and also think of a nonprofit that you want to introduce Glenda to. Share this video so they can understand where she's coming from and how she can help them really achieve a higher level of impact in their community that they serve. So thank you, Glenda. Appreciate you so much.
Likewise.
And thanks again. And we'll be reaching out to you because you're not just a person impacting nonprofits. We're going to diversify to include some other podcasts for you. Thank you so much.
You're very welcome. It's always my pleasure. Have a great day, Pete.
You bet. Thanks. And you